Hello, everyone. Welcome to Inside News with, you've got a little bit of echo from me, but that's the breaks, with Mike Jones and Dale Matthews, and we have three guests with us tonight. But first, we're going to tell you just a little bit about the breaking news that just recently happened. Mike, cue the theme music.
Oh,
Thank you very much. Okay, good. Okay, that's the kind of show this is, in case you didn't know. So Mark Kelsey, who has indicated that he's running for county commissioner against Cheryl Walker, though he's really registered, he did say that, though he's really registered to run against Keith Heck. Okay, he'll sort that out eventually. He did file recall papers today against Simon Hare. And so just at this beginning part, maybe you could mute your audio there, Mike, and just so I'm not getting a lot of feedback. And so so I confirmed this with the clerk's office today, that those recall papers against Simon Hare, and only against Simon Hare, were filed today. Now, we've posted in several places a timeline that will fit within those parameters, whether you go by straight line progression, this is how many you need each week, or whether you go by what we know to be the inverted bell curve in Josephine County, where a whole bunch of people vote here, and then they don't vote at all, and then they vote a lot at the end, or you get a whole bunch of signatures, or then you get very few, and then you get a bunch at the end. So we've done the calculations both ways. We're happy to be able to help. So just want you to know that that process is underway. I did ask the clerk's office, is there some place, will there be some place, is there some place now to start, bringing in petitions? They don't know. They don't have one listed. So we'll bring you that news when we can. Just want to let you know that another thing that just happened recently over in Klamath Falls, that there was a group that was hoping to unseat the Klamath County Commission chairman, Tom Mallams. But those folks did not get enough support. They did not get enough signatures for a recall election against that fellow over in Klamath Falls. This Mallams was the subject of another failed recall effort in the summer of 2013. You may recall that back at you need to not make too much noise there, Bill, because you keep popping up on camera, and because it goes automatically to whichever camera makes noise. The Oregonian, you may recall, on September 11, they had an article about Floyd Przansky, and he's the senator out of Eugene in the news again. And it turns out that the people who were trying to recall him didn't get enough valid signatures to trigger a recall. You may recall that he and a couple other people there were up for a potential recall because of their stand about new rules about gun possession. Senator Riley out of Hillsborough, Susan McLean out of Forest Grove, they're all Democrats. And then the majority leader, the Democrat from Eugene, Val Hoyle, she left her leadership post because she thought she was going to end up being Secretary of State. So these are, I'm sorry to say, these are, well, I don't know if it doesn't affect us here necessarily, but it doesn't look real good for recalls other places in the state. That's the latest breaking news. Now, we have, as you can see over my shoulder, this is about recalls that have happened, and our first guest today is Rob Pell, who was involved with, right? Hello, Rob, and he was involved in a recall effort against city councilors. Mike, with your permission, we'll just go straight off to Rob Pell and let him tell us a little bit about why were you recalled and what's some of the advice that you might give to people today about recalls. Rob Pell.
Well, thanks, Dale. And I think that the 2009 recall that I was involved with, I was the target of, and they successfully recalled me and 4 others. by the way, it was record time. I held office probably less time than anyone can ever hold office, because right at 6 months and a day, which is what the law said, that's the minimum length of time someone could hold office before you try to recall them. 6 months and a day, they were on it. They've been planning it, but they were on it, right then. So, so I was only in office less than a year, but I think that was quite a bit different than the issues currently facing Simon Hare. I mean, I think Simon's issues seem to be based in irrefutable facts. I mean, I think that's pretty safe to say, or pretty close to irrefutable facts. And then the question just becomes your opinion. Should he be recalled or not? He's got apparently an alcohol problem, and a lot of people forget that this is not the first time that this area has had a public official with an alcohol problem. Matter of fact, that's how Grants Pass got the position of assistant city manager. Back, it must be 15 years ago or so now, maybe a little more. The city manager then, Peterson, had an alcohol problem. It was unfortunate, and he unfortunately was physically abusive to some members of his family, and he went to rehab, and Laurel Sampson, they created the position of assistant manager. Laurel Sampson took the reins, and when he came back, the position of assistant city manager never went away, and he became a good manager again. And I guess that's different people have different opinions, but he was a functional person, didn't seem to have any evidence of his alcohol issue. But so back then, or at least in that instance, the public was a little bit, we'll say, forgiving, but I don't think that was his third strike, so to speak. And he seemed to do well in rehab. But we did end up getting stuck with forever an assistant city manager position on the payroll that we probably don't need.
Nice.
But that's a different story. But like I say, I think that back in 2009, it was different. I mean, they really, people may not, some people know this, but they tried to get rid of me before they tried to, I believe, politically assassinate me or character assassinate me before I was even in office. People remember back in 2008, the city council decided that the River District plan was going to be great for Grants Pass, and they were willing to spend, there was 3 different versions of the plan. I think one was about 20 million. The convention center version was about 60 million. And I think one of the versions was over $100 million. And it was really going to benefit, near as most of us could tell, most of the people who are basically rich property owners along the river, like Hellgate Jet Boats and the Riverside Inn and Evergreen Bank and so forth. All these improvements were going to be done at taxpayer expense, but it seemed like the people close to the river, who were already doing very well, were going to be the main beneficiaries. Anyway, due to primarily, I think, Mayor Holzinger at that time and also Ward Warren, they both were very vocal in putting forth the concept of, hey, let the people decide on this. Let's put this to a vote of the people. And because it's a major deal, and every time there was a meeting at City Hall, and I went to 3, the room was packed. I mean, like sardines, we were in there, and tempers were high. And people were very, very, very emotional and adamant that they didn't want this thing. And that was the overwhelming sentiment. And like I say, Mayor Holzinger and Ward Warren, they really started to push to let people vote on this. And then I kind of became maybe I kind of carried the ball at that point. I was on TV probably half a dozen times. And once the city council decided they were going to go forward with this thing, we had about 3 weeks to gather about 1,500 signatures to put it to a vote of the people. And I personally got 754 of those signatures. And I went out before work, after work, at my store. I worked real hard on that. And I was, like I say, kind of a focal point on getting those signatures. At one point, Dave Reeves, who was the election officer for the city at that time, he was also the finance director, he had heard that I needed to be investigated, and he came down to my store to make sure that I was doing it properly and that I was witnessing every signature and I wasn't just leaving the petition on the counter. And actually his his reaction when he left. He says, "Well, you're in the clear. You seem to be doing it right." And I was like, "Okay, great." The day came when we handed the signatures in. I mean, I think people were pretty surprised. We got 1,500 in 3 weeks. And okay, now it's going to a vote of the people. And then the city council decided they were just going to pull it off the table so the people would never get to vote on it, which is how that kind of ended. However, the part that most people don't know about is that Dave Reeves then turned me in and filed charges against me with the state, saying that I didn't witness all the signatures. Now, each time, it was 754 counts of a Class C felony, each one punishable by up to 5 years in jail and up to $125,000 fine.
Wow. Let me ask you, what evidence did he have of that?
Okay, great question. We found out. So I didn't even know that the charges were filed against me. Actually, one morning at 6:15, Jim Moore of the Courier called my house to ask me about the charges. I didn't even know about them. I had to wait 2 hours and 45 minutes to call Secretary of State and find out. But what ended up happening was Secretary of State sent out letters to all 754 people that I signed up with my picture, the charges against me, and everything else. And if I remember correctly, 231 people responded to their questions. 230 of them said he witnessed my signature as he was supposed to, and one person said they couldn't remember. And I asked, okay, well, who is it that's making these claims? He said there are 2 people in the city that were making these claims. One was David Reeves, and the other was Karen Lang, who was at that time the Human Resource Director at City Hall. She was a department head. Those 2 were the ones who made the claim, and they had no evidence whatsoever beyond that. 0.
Wow.
But I'll tell you, when you get 754 Class C felony charges against you potentially, it gets your attention. I saw a couple lawyers, and what was kind of interesting is when they were done with their investigation, months and months went by, and I probably 5, 6 months went by. I finally called up there, and they said, "Oh yeah, you were cleared a few months ago. We let the city know about that." And I was like, "Really? Well, I never found out." They said, "Oh well, yeah, the person who cleared you, she's since retired.
Nice.
First she was sick, and then she retired, and we forgot to tell you. We just figured the city would tell you."
Very
Yeah,
nice.
seriously.
We also Rob.
So I guess
Rob,
in a nutshell, either David Reeves fabricated the entire thing, and/or he was a liar, or whatever. But they had 0 evidence and no reason to investigate.
Rob, also on the line, we have Sandy Casanelli, who can hear, and we've got Bill Hunker, and these people have experience with recalls. Sorry about the echo, everybody. I'll try not to talk very much. Rob, would you tell us, please, a bit about what advice that you'd have for anyone interested in organizing or being part of a recall at this point? Lessons learned, bud.
Okay, I'm sorry I was so long-winded on that first part about how they tried to get rid of me before I was even elected, but because I think you had asked, why did they want to recall us? And just very briefly, I'm just going to tell you the kinds of things that the council began to do, and that I guess the staff found so threatening. I mean, we actually decided that we were going to communicate with the public and let the public know what was going on. I mean, for over 20 years, the city staff had gone to Shady Cove, 40 miles away, to sit there to do goal setting for 3-4 days. They would stay at a resort there. No members of the public ever showed up. They never took part. But we did the goal setting right here in Grants Pass, where people could show up and comment and ask questions. We at the time, the only people from the city that were ever on KJO or ever on the radio were the city staff, who, not elected, they're just hired hands. And, we said, look, if the city staff's going to go on, if you want anybody on the radio, it's going to be the elected people. And maybe we'll have staff with us, but if we feel it's appropriate, but you're going to interview us. And, that's when the city councilors finally started being on KJO. We took we decided, okay, they've got this propaganda tool, the city newsletter. Well, guess what? We're going to write it. Why should we let the staff write it? So what we did, we decided on a subject. We would vote among the city councilors, decide on a subject, and one of us would write it. And the first couple of times it happened, we only did happen a few times, I wrote it and then gave it back to the councilors and we approved it. And then that became one page in the newsletter, and our plan was to take over a second page in the newsletter so we could give the people the information directly without the spin. But this is the kind of thing that the staff kind of saw the writing on the wall and kind of saw that, oh my goodness, these counselors are actually serious about being in power. And that, I think, was, they decided in a hurry that they didn't think they could coexist with us if we were actually going to do our job as counselors and be in charge.
Hey, Mike, cut all mics but mine just for a moment so I'm not echoing, okay? All right, so Rob, to finish up your segment of this, it sounds like what you're telling us is it's essential for people who are trying to communicate with the public to make absolutely sure that they're actually doing the communicating with the public, and that link between those who are trying to do a recall or trying to fight a recall has to be maintained with the public, or it's not going to work. Would that be right, Rob?
I'd say that's pretty well put. You absolutely, and I'm hoping that the current leadership at the Courier, with Travis Moore and Kevin Widdison, I'm hoping that they're doing a little different and better job than was done at the Courier a few years ago. But you just, at that time, a few years ago, you couldn't necessarily rely on getting the straight or accurate story out of the Courier, and how to communicate directly with the people is the, that's, I guess, the $64 million question. But yeah, you got to get your story out, and it's got to be unambiguous, and you got to know that it's right, and you got to be able to back it up.
Sandy Casanelli is also on the line with us. Sandy, maybe you can bring us a bit up to speed about the kinds of things that happen to you, and then talk a little bit about lessons learned and what the current people working on recall would need to do to succeed. Sandy?
Okay. Yeah, it was very interesting to hear what Rob was saying. We got elected the same year, November of 2008. We took office in 2009. And the good old boys in town, the powers that be, had to get rid of the city councilman right off the bat, after 6 months, boom, it was filed, because they, as he said, were letting the people know what was happening, and the structure didn't like that. They had the majority vote, so they had to get rid of them first. So it was just that first year, 2009. They had the luxury of letting me stay in because I was a minority. It was always 2-to-1 vote, and I wasn't a threat to the powers that be that were in place at the time. So I didn't get recalled until 2011. But they had to get there me also, because even though the votes were 2-to-1, I was still telling the public what was going on in the county. And there was a lot of things about my recall that the procedure was not followed properly. The chief petitioner never signed any one of the 646 petition sheets. The front and the back page, one said August 10th and the other one said August 13th. They had two different dates on one form because the initial one that they filed with the clerk's office had my name spelled incorrectly. And so when we all called the Secretary of the State Elections Division and said, hey, look, they spelled my name wrong, suddenly 3 days later there's another form that's miraculously has my name spelled right, but the chief petitioner never signed. So what I'm hearing by comparing notes a little bit with Rob is that the Secretary of State's office will jump in and when it suits them. But when it doesn't suit them, it's like, oh no, you didn't, dot your I's and cross your T's. So what I can say to these people that are currently attempting to recall Simon Hare is just to do it right. Take your time. Make sure you dot your I's and cross your T's. Make sure you sign the back. Know the Oregon Recall Manual front to back. You can go on the Secretary of State's website. It's only 25 pages long, and most of it is forms, so it's really only 13 pages. The meat of it is on page 5. But understand that there is more that you need to know in that manual besides what's written in there. And besides the clerk's office now, before under Art Harvey, I don't think you would have gotten the information that you needed, but I think now you will. Other than the clerk's office, Bill Hunker is probably the best source of additional information that you need to know about gathering these signatures, and we'll let him talk in a bit. But there's things like order your list from the clerk's office, so go through so you can pre-verify the signatures. I don't know if you can cross out invalid signatures from the petition sheets if they haven't voted within the last 5 years, or if there's duplicates or triplicates. Try to make a database of all the signatures that come in so you have duplicates or triplicates. And then don't pay any signature gatherers, because it seems like the state has a negative opinion about signature gatherers. And I suggest that you have a coalition of signature gatherers and you meet weekly to track and assess your progress. They really have to know what they're doing in order to do it right. And it's quite hard to recall somebody. It's not easy, and just do it right. I'm kind of disappointed that they didn't do Cheryl Walker and Keith Beck, because at the same time, while you're out there freezing your butt collecting signatures for Simon, I believe that the recall petition should have been filed for the other two. Not for drunk driving, but they have been doing stuff that is almost as egregious. And I would say let the public decide who they want to keep in office and who they want to recall.
Hey, Mike, do that cut thing again for me, would you please?
Okay.
Okay. So, and the only reason I'm saying that to him is because apparently we're getting some echo and just off of mine. One of the things that we know when we were looking at a recall before is there were a number of people recall Simon Hare. And the time before that, when there was a recall, and we'll talk with Bill Hunker about this in a moment, there was a recall against Cheryl Walker, and one of the things that I suggested, was that we give the public the ability to potentially recall all 3 commissioners if that's what they wanted to do. We know now, and we've made this very clear, that there were 3 key people that blocked that because they felt that Simon Hare was their guy and that they could work with their guy, and one of them was Jack Swift, and another was Ward Ockenden, and another was Jim Dittmer. And they adamantly opposed this, and while we did try to see that the documentation got in on time, there was a group of people who kind of got in ahead of time and put in the papers. This was not what Art Harvey had told us. He is no longer, in a couple of days, he won't be the county clerk anymore. He'll go over to Jackson County. He told us that there was another date, but he let them get in earlier. So it wasn't a happy circumstance. But it looks at this moment as if we will not get a chance to say goodbye to all 3 commissioners. We'll have to wait till May to say goodbye to 2 of them. But the person that really has the latest information about this and what to do and what not to do is Bill Hunker. Here's Bill Hunker.
Well, here, hang on a second before we jump over to Bill. Let me ask this: what do you think of the question that, or the statement that perhaps it's a waste of time concentrating on a recall effort for all 3, because the primary for two of them is coming up in May, and we can just as easily, if there's a concerted campaign, get rid of those people in the primary and concentrate on the one recall of Simon Hare. What do you think of that?
You know what? We're going to have to deal with Keith and Cheryl even if they don't get through the primary until January 1st of 2017.
Right.
So the thing is leave the primary as a second. If we don't gather enough signatures to recall Cheryl or Keith, then that's the second alternative that the people have in order to get rid of them. My thing is it costs a little bit more money to print all the $600-700, $600 or $700 of the petition sheets. But you know something, in the long run, if you're standing there collecting signatures for one, how hard is it to put two other clipboards on your table and offer it to people if they want to?
Yeah, I could see that, but then you have the added burden of having to give a spiel to each person for all three of the commissioners as well.
Just have them read the back. The back of the petition sheet that says why they're recalling people.
I'd like to jump in. The one thing too, though, and I can see both sides of this for sure. I mean, it's not a lot of work to try to do three, not a lot more work. You have to also keep in mind that if they're all recalled and there's a void, appointees are generally not close to qualified and very often not particularly interested. They end up somehow getting appointed. Most of the appointees that I've seen are not ones that had ever showed up at meetings. They're not ones that ever waited to speak and felt passionately about anything.
Right.
They don't, they've never read charter, and so, you got to realize that you'll be dealing with people who would then hold office that may have nothing close to being qualified to do the job we'd be asking them to do.
Listen, it's going to be Cheryl and Keith that are going to pick that third person, that third commissioner. Mm-hmm. And do you think we're actually going to get somebody that's going to be so much better than anything that the state could appoint?
Yeah, but wait just a minute, though. Because you do have Keith and Cheryl picking this appointed person to fill out the rest of the time until the election. But that's only between May and November.
That's correct.
You're going to have somebody in there who's poised to run for that position right away. So the amount of damage that you're going to get from this appointed person, number one, politically, it's going to be very difficult to have this third person be the deciding vote in some earth-shattering thing. I mean, politically, that's not going to go over very well. So I doubt very much would happen between, say, June and November with this new person.
I don't know. I see we already have two people with one mindset, Keith and Cheryl. It doesn't really matter who the third person is, but this is the problem. It's the Keith and the Cheryl mentality that is harmful to Josephine County, and I would take a roll of the dice with whoever the governor appointed.
No, realistically, I think that, and I'm a city dweller, so I have a little different perspective, and it's probably in some ways a minority perspective, but I think that if whatever group wants to get rid of Simon Hare, they need to focus on Simon Hare, because I personally don't think there's the political will to get rid of Keith Hecht. No matter what kind of job you think he may or may not be doing, I don't think there are that many people who are shocked and disappointed. I think the people who voted for him would likely vote again to keep him in office. I don't think that there's, I don't think that the perception is the people that supported him the first time. I don't think they're shocked and disappointed with what they got.
And this is interesting to get this perspective, because Dale and I are bathing in our contempt for these people most of the time, and so we don't have the perspective of just the person walking down the street who voted for the guy and don't have anything bad to say about him, really.
But the actual facts on what this guy is doing. Well, I know we're breaking the law, but I don't care. You know, they're meeting, you know, behind the public's back. You know, he sleeps through half the meetings and doesn't even know what's going on. He's just a rubber stamp for Cheryl. You know, there are, you know, the painful reality is these people need to go.
Yeah.
And
I probably agree with that, Sandy, but I will say that the chance of getting rid of Simon, I think, is way greater focusing on him alone than it would be on all three. That's my point, I guess.
And I actually do agree with that as well, and because right now, if he were to run for re-election and he was running against even, you know, some really unknown person, he would probably lose big time right now. And I think so you have to capitalize. I think the next 60 days you really need to capitalize. You should be done, you know, especially with this wave of negative attention that he's getting. I don't see any reason why you don't make that happen in the next 60 days.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can get Bill Hunker in here, you guys. Bill, would you talk to us a little bit here, bud? You got to jump in on the show.
I'm really enjoying what I'm hearing because I relate to it very much. I want to say that I think Rob, early on what he said today, was absolutely key in any recall, and that is communicating. You've got to get out and somehow get people's attention. We're all involved. Everybody here is involved and know people who are involved, but most of the whole people that have to sign, 60, 70% of them don't know what's going on. We have people who don't even know we have commissioners, say anything about what their names are and what they ever did. Yeah, you've heard the Simon story, and it might ring a bell. But I've had people tell me already, hey, I've been drunk a lot of times. I was picked up for DUI. It happens. And that's kind of their input. I'll tell you something that I ran onto that was very surprising, and I don't think it's changed. It may have changed slightly. And that is because of the 5 city councilors that were recalled, and then Sandy Casanella that was recalled. When we came along with Cheryl Walker, we had a surprising number of people who said, you know what, I don't do recalls. I don't care what the problem is. I don't care what they do. They stay in until their term is up because I don't want to be a part of a recall. I thought maybe you'd get a half a dozen. We got consistently a certain amount of people that said that day after day after day. And they weren't pro or against what we were doing. They just said, I don't do recalls. I don't believe in recalls. And so you're going to have that. Ross Perot was right. The devil's in the details. And the details on this, I've talked to you, Dale, on this just briefly the other day. The biggest thing I've got to say about this recall right now is the absolute worst thing they could ever do is try and time this in to the May 19th election. They have put themselves in a box, and I speak from personal experience. They've put themselves in a box here to meet that date. And what they do not know and understand is it is absolutely by law things have to happen at a certain date. You have X number of days to do this and X number of days, and there is no variance. What they have to do now is they cannot turn their signatures in early. Because if they do, the clock starts the moment they turn those signatures in for the county clerk to end up verifying them. Let's say they get verified. Let's say they did a terrific job and they're 3 weeks early or 3 days early, and they turn their signatures in and they're verified. At that point, the county clerk has no option but to start another election within days of the May 19th. So if they're 3 days early and they get all the signatures they need, now we're going to have 2 ballots go out, 3 days apart. And believe me, that doesn't work for anybody. So the other thing is, you can't turn your signatures in 1 moment earlier than the exact time that has to happen to have that on the election on May 19th. Therefore, you can never turn them in and say, well, you know what? You need another 150 signatures here, and I think you got it. And you run out in the next week or whatever you have left over and get those. You can't do that when you line up with a May 19th election. So the worst possible thing that they ever could do is line up with that May 19th signature. Don't do that. Stop it. End up finding your own special time. It doesn't matter. You can have your special election anytime you want it. Now, what we heard and what I was encouraged very much by Art Harvey, I was a good Boy Scout at the time, and Art said, you know what? If you can roll this into the November election, it's going to run around $4,000 extra to make that happen for recalling anyone. If you don't, it's about 35 to 38,000. So I said, oh, I'll be a good guy here. Let's roll that in, save the county some money, and we'll, off we go, and we'll all be heroes. It helped kill us to try and roll into that election. And my Boy Scout attitude about helping them save money on an election went away. If you're going to make this happen, it really is an effort. And I'm sorry to see the 2 other people that got recalled. And I do believe that there was an enormous amount of help with Sandy Casanelli's. I think that their hands were held and everything was looked after. I heard some stories and I talked to some people. But if you're on the other side doing a recall, it's an extremely time-consuming, and as Rob Pell says, and everything has to do with communication. Can you get people out there day after day after day after day who stay as great volunteers with that personal energy, because you can't check on them all? And we had to go to paid signatures in order to get the numbers that we wanted, not because the people that we had weren't performing. We didn't have enough people who were willing to stay and harness the amount of time it takes. So it's not a cakewalk. And I have the distinct impression that Mark may feel it is, that he's going to ride a wave here where people will chase him down the street waving a pen and saying, oh, let me sign because it's there. I don't think so.
Hey, Mike,
there'll be a few.
Mike,
I have
just a second, Sandy, if you will. Just want to point out and ask each person after Sandy's finished about signatures and verification. Want you to let you know that recall that was tried against Pat Duffy, that they had gotten well over 8,000 signatures that were verified, but they had turned in 10,000 signatures, and a lot of them were rejected because they were duplicates, or they were from people who weren't registered, or they were from people who thought they were registered and they weren't. So after Sandy's done, I'd appreciate hearing from all 3 of you. What about verifiable signatures? Sandy?
Well, I just wanted to say something about what Bill was saying. He knows more about it than I do, but I'm of the opinion that during major elections like the November or the May, the populace is favored. Like it would be more difficult to recall somebody like Rob Pell or me if it was on a May or November ballot, because everybody's out there voting. But on a special election, the majority of the electorate is not going to vote, and you just get people like the employees and the unions and the people with vested interests. They're the ones that get out in force and recall people like Rob Pell or I. So maybe the fact that they filed today might not be a bad idea if it's on the May ballot, because more people in the county will be voting.
That's only if they can get on. Nobody will be
Right.
voting if they can't get the signatures. And I'll tell you, one of the little quirks that we have in the election law is if you have a regular election and you turn in your ballot, but you don't sign your ballot, then it ends up that the county clerk sends you a postcard and said, you voted and we have it, but we don't have a signature. So would you please come in and give us a signature? If you do, then your vote is counted. If you're signing a petition and your signature doesn't match, there is no way to fix that. And they do that deliberately because they found that they don't want people coming and verifying their signatures and saying, oh, you couldn't read my signature? Here, let me give you another one. You can't do that on any signature that is thrown out if it's a recall. You can do it on any election and fix your signature. You can't on a recall. So it's a slanted beam.
I'd like to say something also about the signature, and I think what Bill said, the analogy or the picture in people's mind that he was trying to conjure, I think, is exactly accurate. That if anyone thinks that there's going to be people chasing you down the street with a pen to sign, yeah, that happens sometimes, but not very much. And I'll tell you, with the River District Plan signatures that I went out and got, we had a challenge of it being a city issue, which means that any county signatures didn't count. Yeah. So, and a lot of people weren't quite sure where they lived and urban growth and what all that meant. But even something like that, where a huge number of people, huge percentage of people wanted that on the ballot, that's still, even though so many people wanted that on the ballot people to be able to vote on the River District Plan, it still was a lot of work to get those signatures.
Well,
and that was a time of year when it was sunny and easy to be outside, and there are groups outside and so forth. This is a tough time of year to get signatures.
Well, and this is why I think that this calls for social media savvy, because you have access to large numbers of people that are there on a daily basis, and you start hammering them with the images that you want them to see, and and electronic signature downloads. In other words, they have to download a form, print it out, sign it, and take it in. Now, that's a tough thing to get to somebody to do. But if you're hitting them with the information, you're putting out videos on it, you're talking about it on this show and posting that on Facebook, along with a link to an electronic signature form, you're going to get a lot more of those people. Not only that, you can put out the word and say, listen, I'm going to be in this particular location. Tremendously powerful. There's a number of pages which are Josephine County pages. There's Josephine County Neighborhood Chat's got about 10,000 members. You've got Josephine County Politics has a couple hundred members. You've got the Scanner page, which is Mark Kelsey's page. They got 7,000 people in there. That is tremendously powerful if you even get a sliver of that. And there's like 8 or 10 of these pages here. Now they have some redundant membership. But there isn't any question that this is the new way to go, and presidential campaigns are using this to with great effect. And I think you're a fool if you don't take advantage of it. But you also have to have the people beating the sidewalk too. So.
Mike, I'm also concerned about this because we'd like to help. I mean, we do videos and we can help contact people. But I have on our show who know a lot about recalls. Have you been contacted by anyone about working together with them?
Not a soul.
This recall?
Not a soul. No. And recalls. There's things they can do, and they did it for Sandy, and that is, number one, you go down and you get a disc of all the current voters, and it takes you about 2 hours, about every 3 or 4 days, if your signature gathering is going well, to enter those and double check them against the voters, the actual voters right then. And if you're going 90 days, I would suggest you get two of those. The other thing that nobody realizes that Sandy's group did, and that's one of the things I think that made them as clean as they were, they asked them several things. One, have you voted in 5 years? Well, I don't know. If you don't know, sign this paper. And they re-sign a signature. Have you ever done X? No, I can't sign this paper. They were turning in handfuls of new signatures constantly with Sandy Casanelli's recall.
Mm.
We did a few, but every time you would re-sign a re-up paper, you're a brand new voter, and you're clean as a whistle.
Right.
If you did vote in 5 years, there's no way you get in if you intend to vote tomorrow. You're left out.
Well, and it's interesting because the other day, Dale and I, matter of fact, Dale was down at Republican headquarters and he was talking to Vivian, and she was sitting right there in front of a computer and checking out the voter registration and indicating to me that even though I thought I had set myself up as an independent, that actually I had been put in the Independent Party of Oregon, which is some far left liberal outfit, and she changed my voter registration right there. So
yep.
I think it would be very beneficial to have somebody like that who has a connection, Wi-Fi connection through their cell phone, and is able to check on people's status and if they're not registered, register them and take care of the illegitimacy factor right there when you're getting signatures.
Yeah, it's good. And then somebody I think should make up. I volunteer to do this. Make up a database of all the signatures that were collected to catch duplicates and triplicates, because that's what hurt Bill for his Walker recall.
Yeah, if you get a triplicate, you're just dead in the water on a first run. And I did.
And there is,
believe it or not,
sinister forces who will sign that 3 times.
Yes. And believe it or not, on our first go-round, they found a triplicate. And you tell me what the odds are on a first go-round where you're picking them at random to come up with a triplicate. And I think it could have been a plant. There's no way to know that. I found the woman's name, but it doesn't matter. She was a legitimate voter, and when it shows up as a triplicate, it's like you are stuffing the ballot box.
Now, Bill, speaking of plants, have you looked in your own house? I think I see one right behind you there, bud.
That is hiding all of our stuff that no one's allowed to see. Is a plant right there.
Okay,
this is Rob, and I'm going to thank you and Mike and Sandy and Bill, and a lot of wisdom coming from Bill, and I hope that people really listened. And I got to go figure out a way to pay the bills. So. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Hey, thanks for being on, Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. And with the other two here, would you have anything that you'd like to say in, let's say, 10 seconds or less to sum this whole thing up on your behalf? I'm kidding. 5 seconds for Sandy, 5 for you.
No, just I'm glad somebody is doing this, because a lot of people have said, we should recall Simon, and he took the initiative and he did it. So bravo. Let's just hope he does it right.
Yeah. And the best way to do that is join him and make it happen.
Yeah. Yep.
Mike, do you have any closing words for us here, bud? Words of wisdom. Advice from Mike Jones.
Wow. Words of wisdom for me. I don't know. I don't have really any words of wisdom. I say, if you see one of these petitions, don't pass it by thinking that I'm going to sign that later. Do it right away. And, I'll do my best to help in putting out the electronic signature forms, and whenever I know that somebody's going to be in a particular place, I will try to help get people there. Other than that, yeah, I don't know.
Well, so far it hasn't been greeted with overwhelming happiness, but we are doing everything that we can to get information out about this recall, about where you can take your forms, where you can get your forms, what the procedure is, what's going to happen next. We'll try to tell you that. I just talked today to the clerk's office to get you guys the information. We will do everything that we can for the upcoming May primary, and we'll keep you advised about what's happening with the commissioner's initiation of a new levy here in 2016. So if you keep in touch with our show, we will do whatever we can to keep you informed, which apparently is one of the key ingredients of all of this. Thank you for joining us this evening. I hope that you found this an informative show.